Very good. We will begin today's Liquor Control Committee meeting. We have several items on the agenda today. Agenda item number 1 is to approve the minutes of the June 15th, 2022 regular meeting. Hopefully we've all received that ahead of time. If there are any changes or corrections, otherwise we will accept a motion.
So moved.
We have
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, changes?
Just 0.5B, the typo for sever should be server.
Oh, correct. We caught that, or somebody pointed that out earlier. We have it corrected in our final draft.
Okay, very good. Thank you. With that correction, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 2, review liquor applications. 2A, La Fiesta moving to a new location at 2511 Kirsten Lane South. Steve.
So, thank you, Commissioner. They are actually moving into the Moe's, I don't even remember the rest of Moe's name, but the business where Moe's was and Moe's is closed. And so La Fiesta has chosen to move into there with a new lease agreement. This is just a point of notifications that you're aware that they've moved locations.
So I guess if you don't mind me asking, Steve, they don't have to do anything as far as the ownership is the same, the management is the same, and so they don't have to do anything from that perspective.
That is correct. Ownership has not changed, management has not changed, to change a location. And if it were a location that hadn't previously had some alcohol sales, we would probably look at, what some of the other, are there schools or, other things around. But with it being a previously licensed alcohol facility, we felt that this was appropriate to have them move into there.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Anybody wish to speak on that? Otherwise, we will accept a motion.
Move to approve?
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 3, the Police Department monthly report, and 3A is the general report. Chief.
Good afternoon, Board. We have 2 months' worth of data here because of our canceled meeting last month, so a lot to look at. Absent any specific questions from the Board, I don't think there's anything of great significance. A couple of the highlights we did do in early July was a number of licensed premises that had not secured their city license as of July 1st as required, so we did some enforcement on that and got everyone in compliance. And then obviously we've got 2 months worth of compliance checks that is a future agenda item.
Any questions for the chief about the general report?
I have one question, Chief. In a couple instances, it looked like you guys had a fairly busy June and July. And a couple instances, the officer wrote that the customer was overserved. Is that, when he writes that, is that his opinion or is that the claim of the customer?
Yeah, no, that's his opinion.
It's his opinion, okay.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Kate.
I just noticed again that there was over-serving with intoxication to the point of passing out and being unconscious. And so we're still working on that, right? Are we going to address that with the new ordinance suggestions? Or how are we going to move forward to enforce that?
Yeah, I think that's part of the upcoming discussion on some potential changes, yes. But I think it was three different establishments that had an over-serving person of that with those types of issues.
Okay. And I also noticed a couple of minor in consumption.
Those are cited.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add to that, Kay, the over-serving thing, I know we've talked about it a little bit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that bar over-served them. The person could have arrived or there could have been other substances involved, et cetera, correct?
Yes, I think the discussion is going to revolve around the establishment's responsibility to make sure before they serve someone that they aren't in that condition. And realizing that can come on very quickly, but there are some things that they could do internally that law enforcement is not able to do externally to really police that.
Okay.
Very good. Any other questions?
For the situation at Cowboy Jack's where an underage person was hospitalized because of the overconsumption, it sounded like there was one citation, but there were multiple people there who were under 21 and drinking. Is that correct?
Anyone that was under 21 would have been cited.
Okay, so there were more than one citations.
There may have been. I don't have all of the info, but I know that if anyone that was under 21 that they had identified, they would cite, absolutely.
Okay, and the server, was there a citation offered there?
I don't know that they cited the server without digging up that report. So I'll have to check. I can follow up for you if you'd like.
Thank you.
Okay.
Very good. Any other questions? Otherwise, we don't really need to take action. The next ones after that, we will take action. So if it's okay with everyone, we will move on to 4, the compliance failures from June 22nd. And if you want, I will just go down the list. 4A, or what works best for you, Chief? There's
that's
several
fine.
things.
Let me get the list here.
I'll just kind of go while the chief's
Sure.
getting things, but we kind of have a list here. Compliance failures from June 22nd. Blaze Pizza, Old Broadway, Plaza Alteca, Faux Delicious, Izumi, and Tailgaters.
Yeah, in each one of these, the underage person, 19-year-old female, was served an alcoholic beverage after either being carded or not carded. So in all instances, I would recommend following the matrix. In one instance, at Faux Delicious, the actual person taking the order was a 15-year-old employee, but then the alcoholic beverage was served by the manager. But that's basically the same in each instance. That was the June checks that we did.
And so do you want us to, I don't know, Steve, as far as the order, do you want us to take action on the 4A, or is there a specific order that you want us to do this? But the other thing is we want to give people an opportunity if they want to get up and speak. So to me, of any of those, there were the June 22nd, Blaze Pizza, Old Broadway, Plaza Alteca, Faux Delicious, Izumi, and Tailgaters. If anybody wants to get up and speak and comment about it, otherwise we'll just, do you want us to take action on that, Chief?
Yeah, I would recommend taking action on them. The citations were issued to the server in all instances, and then in terms of the actions against the licensee, I would just recommend following the matrix. I believe this would be Izumi's second failure, and that's certain on the other ones. First time for the rest? First time for the rest.
Did you say Izumi was the one with the 15-year-old taking the order?
That was Faux Delicious.
Oh, pardon me, excuse me.
Yeah.
So Steve, when we go through server training, we make it clear the rules that you correct. I mean, isn't that part of the server training that they know, who is able to serve and who isn't? I mean, that isn't really a questionable thing.
Yeah, and I guess just to point out, to be fair, that we did go back in August and check everyone except, it looks like, Faux Delicious. And they passed in August, but they did not pass in June. So I'm just going to recommend following the matrix and hoping that they continue to enforce that.
Right. Okay. If there are any other comments or questions, otherwise we would accept a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Nancy, go ahead.
So I am just going to request that, in fact, you do find a violation of the ordinance rather than of imposition of the penalty matrix. The penalty matrix is a summary of what's in the ordinance. You need to find a violation and then impose the sanction as provided by the ordinance for appeal purposes. So that would be the motion, is to find a violation and impose the penalty as provided by the ordinance, rather than just adopt the penalty matrix.
Okay. So if it's okay, if you're willing to make that motion.
I will make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Thank you for clarifying that, Nancy. Any other comments or questions about that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And now we'll move to 4A, past compliance checks from June. Applebee's 45th, Bison Turf, Crave, Delta, Happy Harry's on 43rd, Herdon's Horns, Kingpins, Labby's, Lila Tia, Longhorn, Osaka, Pounds, Rooters, Royal Urban Plains, Sickies on 13th, Sickies on 45th, Side Street, Sweet Shots, and VFW. So those were all passed, correct? And go ahead, Steve. Looks like
Yes.
you have something to add.
No, Commissioner, I just felt that it was important to,
Yep.
list the people that did pass. And so there's no action needed here. This is just for information purposes. Those were the people in that June compliance check that actually did pass the compliance check.
No, that's excellent. I think that's a good thing. And so then we don't really need to take action, but we'll just move on to the next one. 4B, passing compliance checks in August. 701 Eateries, Baymont, Beerfish, Blaze Pizza, Cowboy Jack's, Izumi, Old Broadway, Plaza Alteca, Tailgaters, and Toasted Frog. And the other thing that was obviously in the paper the other day, there was no failures in August. And to me, I was a little bit hesitant about these fines because I believe they're fairly strict, but I do think that's had a positive impact. I do think that people don't like seeing their names in the paper and also having fines. So I don't know if anybody has a comment about that. Go ahead, Chief.
No, I would agree. I think that, again, a little enforcement has a positive impact.
So I guess from our perspective, and I don't know if anybody has any comments on that, but to me, that was a pleasant thing to read in the paper that everyone passed. And so hopefully we'll continue that, and maybe we'll have to have a sign up like they do at some workplaces where the number of months with consecutive a safety passing or something like that. But to me, I think that's a good sign. I don't know if anybody has a comment about that, but I think that's a good thing. If that's okay, then we'll move on to 5, that's a memo from Attorney Morris recommending the ordinance changes. And Nancy, if you want to go through them, 5A is a notification of manager changes. Go ahead.
Commissioner, Nancy and I and the chief met and discussed some of the things that were presented back in December. When I put together the agenda for the meeting today, I was under the understanding that Nancy was going to be presenting the memo, but she wanted it to come from me instead, which is fine. The three of us worked together on it jointly. And really I've included in your packet the slide presentation that the police chief presented back in December that listed some of the recommendations that were made back then. And so we're kind of circling back. Felt like maybe there was a little bit of frustration on the board's side that there were certain businesses that were maybe not operating the way we thought a responsible business should be operating, and what could we do? And with our current ordinances the way they are, we can't just go out and suspend a license for 3 days or something like that. And so we tried to throw around some ideas of where we could start tightening things up. And so that's basically where we were at. One of the things that we had discussed was the notification of manager changes. Right now, we, a lot of times in the auditor's office, don't find out, and then we don't have correct information for the police if they need to get a hold of a manager. And so if a manager changes mid-year, we don't find out until renewal time when the information is updated. And currently, the way that the ordinances are set up, we don't get the information to do a background check on that manager until, after the initial application is completed. And so I think that was one of the things that we were looking at, possibly is to require that if manager changes, that there's a notification to the auditor's office, and that we are provided the information so that we could do a background check.
Can I make a quick comment, Steve?
Yes, sir.
So I think obviously businesses have employee and staff changes all the time. And so I think you have to make sure you give them a little bit of time as well. Is that going to be incorporated in that?
Yes, absolutely. We would give them a certain amount of time, and then if I'm trying to think of how that was discussed. We would give them 30 days to notify us, and if we discover that there has been a management change and we haven't been notified, we would provide them a time period to respond with that manager change.
And I guess my opinion on that is that's only fair with all the other businesses that have had background checks and all their staff, and you have to be consistent. So I would support that. I do think you have to make sure we have time, and also we have time for the background check and things like that. So I think, but to make sure that they have to notify us, because everyone knows you have staff changes. Every business has staff changes. So
You know, really, in the renewal process, I can think of at least one business that ended up not renewing this year. They actually had 2 locations. But having that local contact and having a phone number that was answered, or an email that was answered, proved extremely frustrating. And it's happened 2 years in a row with the same business. And so that, I think, is one of the reasons that at least from the auditor's office, we were interested in pushing this one forward to try to make sure that we're getting that information.
And I guess I do think that's, obviously lots of the establishments have local owners, but a lot of them are national franchises. And those are the ones you're talking about where it is important for us to know who the local rep, they have to have somebody locally for us to get a hold of. And like you said, we were having challenges with that. So I do think that's a good move. Anyway, I'm sorry. And if there's any other questions or comments, please feel free to jump in. But go ahead, Steve, if you have anything more.
I got one piece. Just to add to that a little bit, if you look at this, the background slide, the first slide in the PowerPoint presentation, about the 7th bullet point, owners required to provide information regarding manager changes, advise city within blank. So again, board decision in terms of what's reasonable notice about that manager change, which we would anticipate would be a short time frame. And then the next one talks about completing the background within 30 days. So then, based on their notification and getting that paperwork in, we would on our end then complete that within 30 days, or at least be in the process of doing so.
And I think that's great. And so I don't know what your plan is for this, but to me, we're going through this for the first time today. And so I want to give everybody an opportunity to contact us, the license holders, contact the Liquor Control Board or the commissioner, so we make sure we have opportunity for public input and input from the business owners and things like that, if that's okay. Does that make, I don't know if that makes sense to everybody, but this is kind of the first time through for us. You've been working on it, but kind of the first time through for all of us seeing it. So is that kind of your plan? That we're going to go through it today, or?
Yes, absolutely. This is to reintroduce, if there are any of these items that you feel should be pushed forward, we would need a motion to go to the city commission to be directed to make the ordinance changes. So we can go through these first, and then if there's some of these that you say, yeah, those are ones we need to push forward on, then we can start making those changes.
Well, what I would like to do though is, even if you decide to go ahead, but it would still come back here before it goes to the city commission. Because to me, this is the first time we're seeing it as a group. And so I would like to be able to have everyone comment to us first before we go to the city commission. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do, yep.
Okay. So go
I'll
ahead.
Are you ready for the next one then?
No, unless there's more questions.
I have one quick question,
Sure.
Steve. You mentioned, finding out that a manager has changed. What are some of the ways that you learn this information? Like, I see on police reports, they write down the manager name. Do you guys cross-check it with the listed manager or anything like that?
Not currently. Right now, it's at renewal time is the only time the auditor's office is updated.
Okay.
And so it's just a matter of updating the auditor's office records that there's been a manager change. For instance, we do have one business that the police department is doing 3 background checks on, 3 potential managers that they want to see if any of them, will vet out appropriately. That's very unusual in our past history that a business would approach us to do that. And so we encourage that. I know in past times, again, I've been here too long, but some of the applications that we've gotten, the background check on the manager came back, and the business, before issuing the license, decided we're not going to move forward with that person. So it really benefits the business owner and the business itself to have that, that employee vetted as to whether or not, there may be things in their background that you don't want at your establishment.
Go ahead, Kate.
So are you looking for us to fill in these blanks? For example, what the time frame is? The seventh bullet, owners required to provide information regarding manager change, advise city within, are we talking a week or 2 weeks? Do you want us to give you a recommendation, or are we, what is the intent?
I think when this was first presented, it was for that discussion. I think reasonably say 24, 48 hours to call and tell us there's a change, because you're obviously able to put that person in position is not unreasonable, but we wanted to leave that up to the board. And then getting that paperwork to us so that we can complete the background within 30 days. And if you kind of follow those bullet points down from basically enforcement oversight piece of that, failure to provide the background information for the manager, recommended $500 fine. If not done within 21 days from notice of failure, recommended suspension of license until completed. So these are suggestions that the three of us put together initially. And I think that could all be tweaked as the board thinks they would like to do before we move it ahead. But that's kind of just initial, here's what we think might be a reasonable approach on that issue.
Okay.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move on, Steve, unless there's a specific thing you wanted to point out.
Well, just one more comment on that is that, you may have a manager that leaves and you haven't yet named a new manager. So there may be, maybe you let us know that, hey, so-and-so left, they're not employed with us anymore. And then at the time that you've done your hiring process, then you'd bring forward that name of the new person. So, I mean, there's obviously some issues or, items to work through on exactly how that would all work out.
Well, part of this is ideally, we just want to be notified as to a
Exactly.
management change. That's the main thing. And so hopefully you don't think you have to use fines and punishment.
Right.
And to me, the concept is we just want to be notified so we know, especially from the police or management, if the city has to contact, we want to know who to contact. And so even in the interim, if you have a manager leave, we want to know that instead of just once a year, which is basically what the situation is now. Wouldn't you say that's correct, Steve?
That is correct.
Yeah. So, okay, let's move on. And like I said, this is the first time through, and we'll have it, before our next meeting, anybody that wants to contact us, any of the members of the Liquor Control Board or city staff or the commissioners, we'll have this brought to us again, and then we'll have more specific numbers to recommend, and then we'll go from there. If that's okay with everyone, that's kind of the concept. Okay, so let's move on to 5B, server training changes.
So one of the things that as we were discussing is it seems pretty obvious that we need to improve the way that we're doing our server training with the number of failures that we've been having, compliance failures. And some of the provisions that are in the ordinance currently allow up to 90 days to be trained. We really feel that if we can get to the point where we have an online server training that's available 24 hours a day, that the servers can take at their time frame, what works for them, that there really wouldn't be any reason to not have everybody 100% trained. You should not have somebody going on the floor serving alcohol that hasn't had training. That first 2 hours of their employment could be, sit down at the computer and do this online server training. And then the other thing is that currently the server training card does not need to be present. The server can present it at a time later. And we just feel like the server should have that with them, or the business should have record of that. Right now, a lot of the businesses don't have records of which of their employees have had server training. They kind of rely on us to tell them, and we just really need them to be able to step forward and take charge of that process and know that their servers are trained. One of the problems with this part is that currently the public health does not have an, readily available server training. And so, there would be issues to work out there. But, as Commissioner's been saying, this is the first time that we're kind of looking for this. Is this the way that the board would like to move with something like this?
I think I'd just make a comment. I think that until they get the online, that might be a little burdensome to have them trained prior to getting on the floor. I mean, I'm sure there are situations where they lose a couple servers and they need to bring people on quickly and won't have that. So how often is there server training right now? I think you state nevertheless the number of classes presently offered would accommodate this change in the short term. How often do they have classes?
Well, at least monthly, and I know during the renewal time period, they're having weekly meetings or weekly classes. I think that with the time that it takes to write an ordinance and to get that ready, I think that public health would be willing to look for an RFP to get a server training that would be readily available 24 hours a day. Those two things could be moving down the same path. We would not necessarily enact the ordinance then until we know that that server training is readily available.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me then.
If we're talking about who will hold a server card, is it the server? Is it a business? Is it us? I'm kind of surprised that we don't have an easily searchable way since we, offer the training. Why can we not search for, when there's a compliance situation?
So my understanding is that, well, the servers currently are responsible for holding the card because a lot of the servers work at a couple of different institutions. And so they may work at 2 or 3 different bars or restaurants. And so that server card can be carried forward to the different places. And so that's where some of the complexity comes in, is that, do you name John Doe as a server at, this bar or that restaurant or this one or all 3, and some of that stuff. And so, and then I'm not exactly sure how Preston's database works that he uses. But from what I understand, it's a burdensome process to go in and try to find a name. The other thing can be, is it Robert Nelson or is it Bob Nelson, or how are they registered, or are they Robert Nelson at one place and Bob Nelson at a different place? So that type of thing, or if a business is entering the name and they get it misspelled, then it makes it difficult to find it also. So those are some of the difficulties that Preston's run into in the past.
I'd probably, my personal thought here is that it probably makes sense for the businesses they need to know if their servers are trained. So it makes sense for them to hold on to the documentation for it.
Yeah, and really, when you take your server training, it's for 3 years. And so with each of your employees, you just need to know date they took server training and date it expires. And then if that employee leaves your employment before it expires, you delete them from your business database. And that way, if somebody is working in multiple establishments, then each establishment is keeping track of that employee and when their server training is due.
I think that makes sense.
Any other comments or questions? To me, there's still a lot of things that we as a city have to clarify before we start making too many more things for the liquor license holders. And it kind of reminds me a little bit about the noise ordinance, where it's like we have to make sure we are all able to keep track. I don't know if that makes sense to everyone, but it's very complicated, and it seems like we're not really all on the same page. So I do think we need to improve it, and I do think online would be a tremendous thing. I think we have to do that. So whatever we can do as fast as we can to get an RFP out, because many cities already do this, so it's not like we're reinventing the wheel.
Absolutely. I would totally agree with that, we've got some steps that need to be taken before we can move forward on some of these things, but still trying to introduce some of these concepts. And if you don't mind, I'll next one on your sheet, not on the agenda, was de-escalation training. One of the things that we're recommending with the server training is that the bouncers take the server training. Since the bouncers are the ones that are letting the people in, they really should be the ones that are IDing those cards and making sure that those, that the minors are not getting in. But along with that, for the bouncers, I know the chief has done some work trying to find some de-escalation training for those bouncers so that we're not getting to the point where, bouncers are going beyond what they should be doing.
And Chief, I guess I have a question. Do they have that, like with server training, where that is like a portion of that, or would that be possibly a separate training?
I think it's really up to your discretion. It wouldn't hurt for everyone to get that, I suppose, but certainly the bouncers. The health department has green dot training. It has a lot to do with those concepts. One of our other license holders uses a course called verbal judo, which is something that used to be even taught in the law enforcement realm back some time ago, just to give them some skills in terms of how to try and de-escalate those situations.
I guess from my perspective, and obviously we have owners here, but usually a lot of the people that are working security are also checking IDs. So to me, the server training it goes hand in hand. And the other thing is, they're also the people that are at the door. If somebody's already intoxicated, letting them in, that's an issue. So to me, these are all things that kind of go together. I'm not sure it's a separate thing.
Yeah, no, I 100% on the server training that they all should get it. I guess I thought you were asking me about the de-escalation training. But either way, I mean, if the board decides that it certainly would not hurt, it would only be beneficial for all our staff to have that information.
And I do think de-escalation training, that's not necessarily just for bouncers either.
Right.
And so I think a lot of this this should just be, and to be able to have most of it online where people can do it, I think that would, at least to have that option, because I think in person, you can learn a lot of things better that way, but I think to have the option, especially when we have lots of turnover in a lot of these positions, it's hard to schedule and get people to show up and all those kinds of things. So, all right, I'm sorry for my commentary, but
I agree,
go ahead.
Dave. I do think we are kind of dealing with two different issues. I do think we should require them to take the server training. And as we're shopping around for online options for trainings, it'd be great if we could look for a de-escalation, something that includes that component. I agree, Dave, I think servers would benefit from it as well. So we could keep that in mind, but as we talk about voting on this potentially next month, I think requiring bouncers to take the training regardless is something we should incorporate. That's my recommendation.
So Chief, what kind of de-escalation training options have you found out there? Have you got a chance to look at that yet?
Actually, that's been done by the health department, so that's actually been in their venue, and they have that green dot training. I'm familiar with the verbal judo, so that's out there, and I haven't done any additional research. That's mostly been handled on the health side.
So Steve, if this is okay, I think we have to have the health department here as well to make sure that we have everybody on the same page and going in the same direction, because you had a little, go ahead, Chief.
I can certainly reach out and confirm that. We've had discussions on this previously, on this training, and we can take care of that as well.
Great. Go ahead, Steve. Are there more
Yeah,
things? Go
no,
ahead.
that was it on the server training and de-escalation. The next thing we were talking about, again, goes back to, the vast majority of our businesses cooperate with law enforcement, try to prevent over-serving, try to stop minors from getting in their facilities. But once in a while, we'll get a business that, kind of marches to the tune of their own drummer. And so when we see that their business practices are maybe problematic for the operation, the safety of the city as a whole, or that their calls are their business operation methods are utilizing a lot of our law enforcement resources, we were kicking around ideas about how we could, currently there aren't any provisions in our ordinance that allow us to temporarily suspend a license or do something like that. And so one of the things that we kind of talked about was is to redo the penalty matrix that we talk about and make it potentially more like a driver's license point system or something like that, where, if you accumulate 5 points over, a period of time, or, cumulatively, that those 5 points require or result in a 3-day suspension of your license. And if that gets to, a different point level, the penalty or the suspension or potential revocation, comes along that way. And it was just obviously something that would require a lot of discussion, but we were just wondering if that sounds like something that the board might be interested in approaching or looking at, along with penalties for the point system, like your driver's license. If you take driver training, then you can get some points back. So maybe there would be ways, to get points back from the city too, or something like that. So again, just very early discussion phases, but we thought at least that way we could write something into the ordinance that allowed a business that isn't operating in the best interests of the safety of the general public and the welfare of the city, that we would be able to then do something with the license other than a clear, full revocation like we have now as an option.
I guess from my perspective, I would be in favor of that simply because in the past, we've had issues with some bars. We've met with some of the owners, and some are more than willing to be cooperative, and the chief can talk about that. But there are some that just simply don't want to. And right now, if they don't want to, there's really not much we can do. And so that's my concern. We're fortunate. A lot of them are local owners. They want to make sure that their business is, and they also have a lot of money invested. They want to make sure, but there are some that are not that way. And so at this point, we were kind of, I don't know, Chief, if you want to comment too much, but that was kind of, we were relying on their good graces, and some of the people don't really care. And so that was my concern. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think, I would strongly advocate for this type of a change to give the board some ability to address some of these issues that we can't by ordinance enforcement alone. And it's very common in many other cities for a board like this to have that kind of ability. You're still going to acquire information, make a decision, offer a due process to that decision. And so I think having that option for those few businesses where we would need to utilize it would be probably pretty beneficial.
And I guess, so like I said, this is for down the road, but I'm sure there's other cities that have already done something like this where I do like the concept of having a period of time where if you accumulate points, instead of, it's just some kind of subjective thing. So if we can copy another city's, type of model, I think that'd be good instead of us coming up with something on our own. Any other comments? Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. A lot of the things we're talking about as far as points are very objective, or whether it's staying open too late, not renewing your license, failing a compliance check. But I also warn that if we put things in there that are subjective by the police or by us, in other words, this is the third time I'm called here in a day because you're having fights or rowdy crowd or whatever, that's very subjective. And we have to be careful about that because I think it's open to interpretation whether they should be, punished in that point.
I agree. And I think I like this idea of, if we shorten the span in which, the violations can kind of add up in the matrix before it gets wiped, if we, have like an annual every year, you can we automatically drop a point. It rewards businesses that have very low numbers of violations, and it kind of keeps the spotlight on businesses where they've accumulated several points in a relatively short period of time. And I think that also allows us to keep a short objective list of violations, because in the current way we do it, it's kind of very difficult to accumulate violations at the pace where we examine the accumulation of those points. So I like this approach. And
Yeah, we're absorbing a lot of data with the police reports and everything else, but we're not accumulating it to look at it over whatever period of time we think is appropriate.
Agreed.
The other thing, like Lydia was saying, is that currently if you serve a minor, you're in one channel. if you stay open too late, it's a first violation of a different part of the ordinance. And so you could have first violations that are, you know, across a broad spectrum of different areas. But really, you know, it all leads to how you're operating your business. And so the point should be cumulative in situations like that. You know, if you're staying open after hours, or you're serving minors, or you're over serving, or whatever those different areas are, rather than being a first bite at each one of those, you know, they should start adding up quicker. So.
Yeah, the other thing I like about this is when we talked about the known compliance failures in August, I mean, there's an example of where they're more aware of what's going on. They're probably being more observant of the IDs and that type of thing. I think we'll have the same concept here, where the more points that they may accumulate, whether they had, you know, a couple people served minors and then all of a sudden they got 2 points against them, I think that's going to de-escalate their behavior in terms of trying to not accumulate any more points. I can tell you, I used to get a lot of tickets in North Dakota because it was so cheap, but they do add up points eventually, and then you have to slow down.
So you're telling us it works?
It works.
Very good. Any other comments?
Just
Go ahead, Steve.
one final comment, and then if you're okay, I'll move on to the final thing that we have on the memo. This one is obviously a very heavy lift. It will require a lot of input from the industry and a lot of discussion, and so this would take a long time to get it into a form where we could start implementing it. Just don't want you to think that that's going to happen really quickly. So.
Nope, that's good. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, go ahead, Steve.
So the final thing that we discussed back in December was the use of technology. And, you know, with technology, obviously, it's changing all the time. You know, we've talked about scanners. We've talked about video systems. Recently, we've heard of some businesses using either metal detectors or metal detector wands. I know the chief has talked about, I'll probably get the term wrong, but kind of like a breathalyzer. When you know, if you do see somebody coming in and you suspect that they may already be intoxicated as they're entering your place, you know, you could have them use this breathalyzer or whatever the term is, you know, so that you could make a determination before you even let them in whether or not you want to serve them. And so some of those areas, you know, I think it's a little hard for the city to mandate some of the things, you know, because then we start saying, well, then your video has to be this quality, or you know, you have to use a scanner like this one and that kind of thing. We do like to see the voluntary use, and we've seen very good results from people that are voluntarily using technology to their benefit.
The other thing I think you might be able to do, going back to the previous item, was with that point system. You know, maybe there's the ability to put into the ordinance that if you have so many points, you're required to get a scanner or whatever. I don't know if that's legal or not, but it sure sounds like it might work.
No, and that was actually one of the recommendations. You're right on point there for both scanning or over-serving, the ability for the board to put some restrictions in based on accumulation of the same violation.
Back to kind of the question of over-serving, I guess I have a little bit of concern about the idea of not allowing patrons in or making them wand. Is the definition of over-served over a .08, or is a person allowed to have more than that if they're got a designated driver or they live upstairs, or how's that going to be defined? I think it's a slippery slope.
I really think that's up to your decision-making. You know, if you're .08, you're already illegally intoxicated. Do you want that person in your tavern? I think they're going to drink more. So, again, if that's a board discussion, I think it would be easiest to follow legal limit of intoxication. Doesn't matter if they have another driver. If they get overserved and pass out and we take them to the hospital, it doesn't matter if they're driving or not. And I think that's the issue, because not all of these people were driving. The instance from the Cowboy Jacks, just to circle back and answer Lydia's question at the same time, was 3 individuals an hour after bar close who were in the area, and one of them had a medical condition because of his level of intoxication. And so that one of those people was under 21 and they were cited. And so because it was an hour after bar closing, we didn't have any idea who served them, so there was no other action with Cowboy Jacks. They said that's where we were and that's where we drank, so they got cited for that. But again, I think future discussion, but I think the easiest thing is if you're checking them and they're at a legal level of intoxication already, you're kind of pushing your luck, because unless they're going to come in and drink water the rest of the night.
Is it the legal limit of intoxication to drive, though?
Yes,
Okay.
but it's a measure. I mean, it's a standard measure. If you can't drive, you're probably not functioning. It's decision-making and balance and coordination and all those things. So again, it could be, the board could decide something different. That's just an easy standard measure in terms of intoxication.
Any
And
other
it-
comments? Go
Well,
ahead.
to me, it's getting to be a little scary when, for the bar owners, where they become the criminals when the person that is consuming things and driving and creating mayhem or disorderly conduct, that's not the focus. I think we're getting to a tipping point where we're putting a lot of responsibility and liability on bar owners who, I think we all agree in general, do a pretty good job. The technology is great. I think it's useful, but the people that I know in the industry and have known for a lot of years, it's still a human factor. They know when to cut somebody off. They know when to say, get out of here. They know when somebody's got some type of fake ID. So I just hope we don't get to a point where we're, this is all, computerized technology and we're, putting the onus, taking away the ability and the experience of these businesses, saying it's a technology, and if you mess up, it's totally your liability. So
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think it is putting too much onus on it. And, after a football game, how many people were walking into Buffalo Wild Wings or whatever? And I mean, it's almost unrealistic to think that after a concert's over that you're going to really be able to expect the bar owner to say, oh, that one looks like you should maybe get wanded. And that one, I think it's overreaching.
I think we should keep the bar owners responsible for the things that we can accurately measure. Too much of this is, some of it's gray area. We're never going to get rid of the problems. People that have been in the bar industry for a lot of years will tell you that it's probably better now than it was. That doesn't mean we still don't have problems, but I think we're doing the right things and having the right discussions. But, mandatory scanners, mandatory video, mandatory you have to give your video to the police. I think, to me, we're all trying to solve the right problems, but I think we're getting really into some, I think, invasive areas, but. So anyway, I look forward to more discussion on it. I'm glad we're not trying to pass this tonight, but.
I guess I respectfully disagree with the slippery slope. I think we have a public health concern, and Fargo and North Dakota are noted nationally for being the drunkest state in the nation. And with colleges here and now school going to be starting again, we've had safety issues downtown. We've had deaths downtown that were due to over-intoxication. And at some point, we have to work at changing the culture of what it means to go out and have a nice evening versus going out and just throwing caution to the wind and not being responsible. And I think we could all agree that once you've started consuming alcohol, you lose your inhibitions to make good decisions. And at some point, someone has to take a stand and to watch out for you. That's what public health does. And aside from that, I wanted to address the Cops and Shops program. And I'm wondering where we're at with that, if that's an option for us to assist the bar owners and the servers to help detect those who are in there illegally as a minor or with a fake ID. If they're not being scanned, then if police can go in and check scans in plain clothes and assist the bar owners and the servers whose detectors didn't pick up a fake ID, are we talking about maybe bringing a program like that back? Is that something we can do to help with that?
From the police department side, no, I don't think that would be realistic for the police to be able to do that. We rely on the business owners to police their interior of their operations. And I don't know that that would be necessarily welcome in all of the establishments as well. So I think really a lot of these things go towards even the point system discussion that we had earlier, and utilizing that to incentivize some of the businesses that have difficulty with some of these issues to implement some better business operations, because there are things they can do internally to address this, and we've had conversations with them, and myself and Commissioner Pipcorn, have met with a couple of different businesses, and there are some of them that say, I need to make as much money as I can as quickly as I can. So these things are hindrances to my profit line instead of the public safety concern. And so, Mr. Nelson's point is valid, but there's also the other side of the coin. And again, this is a smaller amount of our businesses. And if there's some mechanism for the board to address that through the point system or some other fashion, I think that moves the ball forward for all of us in a really good direction to ensure good business climate and enable business climate while ensuring some measure of accountability for a couple of those establishments that aren't incentivized in any way to do more than they are already doing.
The Cops and Shops was a program that was a joint effort with the state. It was a grant-funded program. The state gave money to localities to do the things that you were talking about. I'm pretty sure that that is no longer operating. And so, the chief's concern would be funding for it, one of the concerns. Certainly, there could be something that could be brought back up at the state level to see if there was interest in starting a program up like that again. The other thing on the technology side is that the point of emphasis was just that there are tools out there that individual owners can choose to use. Not that a certain that everybody going in would have to blow or have to be checked or anything like that. It would just be a way that a tool for businesses to use is kind of the thing, is what the thought process was.
Yeah. And one more follow-up to the Cops and Shop concept. We do assign officers to certain establishments where we've had a number of issues. So from that perspective, they do work directly with the manager to address issues and answer questions and things of that nature.
Okay, thank you. I did have a business owner ask me about that, so that's why I wanted to bring that up again too. So thank you.
And I wanted to put an agreement on what the chief said. I think, to me, the important thing that we need to get here is when we have a problem business out there, and we all know through time, who they are or why they are or whatever, that there is some mechanism to, help that person turn the corner to a more responsible business. Because again, it's not like we're dealing with a rash of outlaw businesses out there. We're lucky that we're in Fargo. We have, good operators, but there are some issues out there that we're aware of. And I'm sure there's frustration from the police department that, we can't have any leverage over that at all. And that, to me, is an important discussion.
So this is very good discussion, and so we'll put it back on the agenda for our next meeting. And I guess from the perspective of, we'll just kind of refine some of these things, because then I think we were in support of the notification, the manager changes. And I do think, from my perspective, the server training, we still need to do some better communication within the city with the health department as well, but also there's still some things we need to get to have that whole system be better. And I think we're all supportive of that. So I don't know if there's any other comments. Go
I
ahead,
think it
Lydia.
also sounded like there was some agreement for incorporating the scanners into the penalty matrix. So maybe, that could be part of the proposal that we discuss next month.
Yep.
So just to add that to the list where it seems like there's some broad agreement there.
That's good. And I would encourage everybody, if you have any, like I said, this is the first time that we've gone through it as a group. And so for the public, this is the first time through it. And so if you have any comments, either contact the city staff or us. And obviously, if you want to get up and talk about it, we're willing to do that, but whatever works for you. But I'm sure we'll have lots of comments and looking forward to that. But this is a very good discussion, and we're just kind of trying to improve the system. I would say as a group, that's what we're hoping to do. So any other comments? Steve, do you have anything else to add?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Very good. That concludes our meeting for today. Thank everybody for attending, and we are adjourned.